a pre-recorded talk by filmmaker Dan Habib. So I will turn it over to my friend Sean, who's going to share a few words about our presenter Dan and the importance of inclusion. So Sean, take it away.
Thank you for waking up this Saturday morning. I know it's a bit early. My name is Sean Mera. I'm 22 years old and I'm from Rochester, New York. And when there isn't a pandemic, I spend my summers in Spain with my father's family. I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was about 3 years old. Nowadays, I say I'm on the spectrum since Asperger's is no longer a technical diagnosis. I'm finishing my mechanical technology associate's degree at MCC, and I hope to work part-time while I work on my bachelor's degree. I'm so glad you're all here, and I hope you enjoy Dan Habib's presentation on the importance of inclusion, since it is so important to make sure individuals with disabilities are heard and understood. Couldn't be more than well aware of that myself. Dan Habib is the creator of the award-winning documentary films, including his most recent film, Intelligent Lives, and his previous documentaries, Who Cares About Kelsey? Mr. Connolly Has ALS, including Samuel, which focuses on his own son Samuel, who has cerebral palsy, and many other short films on disability-related topics. Habib has screened and discussed his films hundreds of times in the US and internationally, at universities, corporations, national conferences, film festivals, and independent theaters for educators, families, students, employees, policymakers, and the general public. Broadcast nationally on public television stations, nominated for Emmy Awards, and translated into 17 languages for use as teaching tools worldwide. Habib and his films have been featured on NPR's All Things Considered, People Magazine, Good Morning America, and Education Week in 2012. Habib received the Champion of Human Civil Rights Award from the National Education Association, and in 2013, he received the Justice for All Grassroots Award from the American Association of People with Disabilities. In 2014, Habib was appointed by President Barack Obama into the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities, a committee that promotes policies and initiatives that support the independence and lifelong inclusion of people with intellectual disabilities. Habib and his wife, Betsy, live in Concord, New Hampshire, with their son, Samuel, as mentioned, who's 21. Their older son, Isaiah, who's 24, lives in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Thank you so much, Sean, for the introduction. I'm going to hit share screen for everybody. And please let us know if you have any questions in the chat or Q&A, and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be with you. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Dan Habib, and I'm going to give a talk today called Disabling Segregation. I want you to think back to when you were in school. Maybe some of you still are in school. Maybe some of you are graduated from school. But I wanted you to think back on a classroom from your childhood. And I want you to get a good visual on that classroom and think about what you see in that room. And just visualize whether you're seeing kids with and without disabilities playing with each other, interacting, learning together. What do you see in that room from your childhood? Do you see kids with and without disabilities interacting with each other or not? Okay, hold that thought. And now I want you to think back again to your childhood and think about whether you were in a friendship in which a kid with a disability and without a disability were in a close friendship. So if many of you are thinking, no, I don't really remember seeing kids with and without disabilities in my school interacting together, learning together in the classroom. I don't remember being in a friendship in which there was a kid with a disability and without a disability in a friendship. Well, then you guys are very much in a situation that I was in. When I was 4 years old, I was in a preschool in New Jersey where I grew up, and it was a great preschool. I had a lot of fun, and I got to meet this boy named Richard one day. Now, Richard was a great kid. He used to do things like boys like to do, like carry rocks across the playground with me for no apparent reason. But Richard had a difference. And some of you looking at this photo might notice that difference. Richard had a headband around his head almost all the time. And I remember going back to my mom one day at home and saying, why does Richard have to wear a headband all the time? And she said, oh, you know, Richard's had a lot of surgeries. He's had a lot of ear issues and hearing issues. So he wears that headband probably to protect himself from all the dust you guys are creating, carrying the rocks across the playground. Anyway, that kind of satisfied my curiosity. But looking back on this now, about 50 years ago, it really strikes me that that was such a difference in Richard, that Richard was the kid with the headband, and that really set him apart. I kind of laugh at that now for reasons you'll see shortly. Jumping ahead a few years, I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I had a great college experience. It was a very active campus when it came to social issues. When I was there back in the 1980s, there was a big anti-apartheid movement, pushing for divestment from South Africa because of the racist systems and policies there. There was certainly talk around LGBTQ rights. There were talk around women's rights, but I don't remember any discussion at any point in my 4 years about disability rights. Right through college, it just was not on my radar screen. So jumping ahead a bunch more years, now we're looking at a picture from the summer of 1999. Betsy and I had our first son, Isaiah, who was about 4 years old at that point, and Betsy was pregnant with our second child to be. We didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but what we did know was that we were looking forward to having a family that was active and engaged and doing the kind of things we both did growing up, you know, biking and hiking and camping and having lots of adventures together as a family. Just really excited for what was to come once Isaiah had a sibling. So when Sam was born in 1999, we were so thrilled that we had a second boy. At least I was, because I was like, all right, I know how to do boys. I'll be able to do this parenting thing. Betsy had a beautiful birth. The first few months were typically exhausting, but full of joy and wonder at this beautiful second child. And that kind of sense of I would say, innocent happiness went on for about 3 months or so until we started noticing, Betsy particularly was noticing, that Samuel wasn't doing a lot of the same things Isaiah was able to achieve so easily in his development. Isaiah was the kid that was standing and walking and talking starting around 11 months. But by the age of 4 months or so, Samuel still wasn't really trying to roll over. And 5 months, he wasn't trying to sit up. He wasn't doing a lot of babbling and trying to talk. And so we started getting a little concerned. So we did what a lot of families would probably do, is we called his pediatrician and said, you know, doctor, Samuel's not hitting these milestones and we're not quite sure what's going on. And he said, he was very reassuring. He said, not to worry, you know, kids develop in all different ways and all different paces. It's probably nothing, but just to be sure, why don't you have early intervention come in, and why don't we just have them take a look and take a look to see how Samuel's developing. So we had early intervention services come in, an OT, a PT, speech pathologist into our lives, into our home. And they started asking all these questions about Samuel. You know, he was probably 5 or 6 months old at this point. And they asked, well, is he starting to roll over? No, not really. Is he sitting up at all or trying to sit up? No, not so much. Is he babbling much? No, he's really not. And I remember at one point they asked me, well, when you hold him up under his armpits, do his armpits kind of shrug up like this, or do they hold firm? I said, yeah, they hold firm. And they're like, good, that's great. And I was like, great, I got one right on this quiz that I don't want to be taking. So anyway, at the end of that conversation, we just felt like they had reinforced a lot of the same fears we were having, that Samuel wasn't developing in a typical way. So they suggested we see a neurologist. And the neurologist we saw a couple months later started taking skin samples and blood samples and all these samples of Samuel and sending them all over the world to be tested at labs that analyze the metabolic process, how food is turned into energy. And when Samuel was nearly a year old, I remember, you know, we were just waiting for those tests to come back and hoping, you know, we would just get the information that it was just a simple vitamin or medicine that would fix everything. Because at that point, he was really falling behind in his development, his weight, and his health was really starting to be challenged. And so the doctor did call and he said, you know, it looks like Samuel might have some sort of mitochondrial disorder. Now, at the time, I had no idea what a mitochondrial disorder was. It had been a long time since high school biology. So the doctor said, let's get together in a couple of weeks and we'll talk it through. So I, of course, right after the call, did what most of you would probably do. I Googled mitochondrial disorder. And I remember on the computer, one of the first things that popped up, it said usually fatal. And I just felt like I had been kicked in the stomach by a horse. I mean, I just felt like it was the most devastating moment of my life. Now, I'm thankful to tell you a couple things. One is that there are thousands of kinds of mitochondrial disorders. Indeed, some are fatal, but many are not. They can cause all different kinds of disabilities and impacts, but not necessarily life-threatening. We also have found out that actually Samuel doesn't have a mitochondrial disorder. Just recently, at the age of 19, he got diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called GNAO1 neurodevelopmental disorder. So that has caused the issues, his physical disability issues. But what we realized at that moment in time, around the age of 1 year old, was that Samuel did have a significant lifelong disability, a developmental disability that we describe kind of globally as cerebral palsy. And all that means is that his mind is not able to control his muscles in a typical way. So you can imagine, suddenly our lives were turned upside down. We were coming to terms with the fact that Samuel had this lifelong disability. And now when I look at this cute picture, I also notice his fists balled up. And some of you may have noticed that's actually an early sign of the high tone that he was experiencing that was part of this cerebral palsy. So we went from the bliss and excitement of this, quote unquote, typical life we expected to have with our two kids to uncertainty. And Samuel started having lots more tests and health crises and issues that we were going through, and MRIs and CAT scans, and he had some complications around a tonsillectomy surgery, and all kinds of things just started crashing down on us. And so Betsy thankfully realized, we can't and don't want to just live in this place of uncertainty. We need to find a way to live in a better place, a place where we can continue to function and be healthy as a family. So she found a great program called the Leadership Series, which is actually still run out of the Institute on Disability at UNH, where I work now. But it's part of a national model called Partners in Policymaking that is functioning all over the country. And what it does is it brings together families, sometimes once a month, sometimes even more frequently or less frequently. But the idea is bringing families together to learn from national experts around self-advocacy and advocacy for your kid, around how to navigate the educational system, the healthcare system, the legal system, all these systems that we weren't born to know how to navigate. But the Leadership Series taught us how to navigate these things, and also taught us about the whole notion of disability rights, that people with disabilities deserve the same rights of access to school, to employment, to healthcare, to community life, to housing, to relationships as anybody else. So when she finished this year-long series, she said, Dan, you have to do this. We have to be on the same page. And I did it. And both of us came out of it with the same basic feeling, which was what we want more than anything is for Samuel to feel like he belongs, for him to feel like he belongs. Now, thankfully, Samuel is quite the charmer. And when he went to preschool, he would bat those eyelashes at the girl next to him, and he very much felt like he belonged. So in preschool, it was pretty easy, to feel, and they were incredibly inclusive in the preschool, the same preschool that Isaiah went to, a local preschool that he attended. When he went to elementary school, we had to advocate not so much for him to be included in a regular class. Thankfully, our district saw that as a natural path for Samuel, in a least restrictive environment, as the law says, for him to be included in regular school alongside his peers, who supported him, as you can see, sometimes quite literally for this picture. But we did have to advocate to make sure that all the related services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, were delivered in the natural settings of school, in class, in free periods, in gym, not having him pulled out of class. But we said, no, we want Samuel to be alongside his peers all day long. And the school said, well, we haven't done so much of that, what might be called push-in therapy rather than pull-out therapy, but we're willing to try. And that's all we've ever wanted from people, is just for people to say, we're willing to try. And thankfully, Samuel was also in an incredible classroom. He was in a K-1-2 multi-age classroom taught by a wonderful teacher named Barbara O'Brien, who I'm going to talk about a little more later. But that was such a wonderful way for him to start his experience in elementary school. Now, because Samuel was in school with all these kids all day long, when he went to things like the Boy Scouts after school, it was no big deal for kids to see Samuel rolling in his chair, to use his communication device, to say the Pledge of Allegiance. That was just normal. That's the Samuel that they had seen and known all day long. What was funny is that Samuel was really captivated and interested in joining the Boy Scouts because of the Pinewood Derby, that little car that is carved out of wood that races down and they have competitions. He just loved the Pinewood Derby. And I remember his scout leader saying, Samuel, if you want to work your way all the way up to Eagle Scout, we can make that work. You know, if I have to carry you on my back or whatever it takes, we'll find a way to help you find the path to Eagle Scout. But as soon as the Pinewood Derby was over at about age 10 or 11, Samuel's like, no, I'm good. I'm done with Scouts. But he moved on to other things. He was just in it for the racing. He moved on to other things. He got into theater. And when it came his turn to be up there in Guys and Dolls, like you see in this picture, he said his line with his communication device. He pushed the dice off his lap, and he felt like he belonged right there on that stage. Now, the only glitch was that it was an old stage in an old theater in his elementary school, and the only way for a kid in a wheelchair to get onto the stage was an old creaky lift in the back of the stage. So just before it was Samuel's turn to come on stage, you would hear from the back of the theater, "Eee!" as this lift came up to the stage level. Now that was not a wonderful theatrical experience for anybody. So thankfully, one weekend, a bunch of volunteers came together and they built 2 ramps on either side of the front of the stage for Samuel and his friend Hannah, who's a wheelchair user, and everybody to come up on. And not only did it give a much more dignified and less distracting access for Samuel and Hannah, but it made for much more interesting choreography for everybody because you had people coming and going at all different levels. The families in the audience could get their pictures because kids were at different levels. It really benefited everybody. And Samuel felt like he belonged on that stage right alongside everybody else. Samuel's always been a big sports fan. And, you know, early on when we were doing kind of T-ball, if any of you have coached or been around T-ball, you know it's pretty much like herding cats, right? Kids are running up the third baseline, running across the field. I mean, you're not going to worry about a kid in a wheelchair so much as 2 other kids just colliding at second base. But as he got older and things started getting more competitive, Samuel still wanted to be very much a participant in baseball. So we got to the point where, you know, coaches were pitching and kids were pitching and kids were out or kids were safe. It got competitive. And Samuel was competitive and he wanted to play to win. So the issue was that Samuel couldn't do things exactly the same way other kids did. So he would hit off a tee when the other kids might have hit off a pitched ball. But his friends knew that Samuel just did things a little bit differently. But he was going to be out or he was going to be safe. They weren't going to give him a free base just because he had a disability. So he, at one point, got up there at bat and he recruited 2 of his friends, his brother Isaiah and Isaiah's friend Nick, to run him up the first baseline as fast as humanly possible. that was the idea. So Samuel hit a nice little dribbler down the third baseline, and Isaiah and Nick were ready to go and to push him up the first baseline. The only problem was that they forgot to take the brakes off of his wheelchair. If you might see those 2 brakes on either side. So Samuel almost did a complete header into the ground when the kids tried to push him, and he was out by a mile. Thankfully, he didn't do a face plant. They got him upright. But he was out, and they were all frustrated. Well, the next time up, they were determined that Samuel was going to be safe. So Samuel hit a nice little squibber down the third baseline, which was great because very few kids at that age can throw from third base to first base accurately. And they took the brakes off, and they started running up the first baseline. And it was kind of like a Roadrunner cartoon. You just saw legs and arms and dust, and it was a kind of a big locomotive train going down the first baseline, which was great, except that the first baseman was not paying attention at all to the game. I think he was more interested in the airplanes up in the sky or picking daisies out of the ground, and he was about to get plowed over by this locomotive. Thankfully, my neighbor Dave was actually coaching first base and picks him up, pulls him out of the way. The kids fly through the first base. They're safe. Everyone's alive. It was a good day. And Samuel continued to play baseball right through Little League. And he moved into an adaptive bike. His coach, Doug, very competitively would push him up the first baseline. But he felt like he belonged on that baseball field alongside his peers right through Little League. Jumping ahead a bunch of years now, Samuel is nearing 21 years old as I record this, and his brother Isaiah is 24. And I'll talk a little more about some of the years preceding this in high school, but I just wanted to give you a sense that Samuel has grown up a lot from those early years. Samuel during high school got involved in a lot of things that, again, helped him and made him feel like he belonged. He got involved in something called Unified Sports, which is a program that was initiated by the Special Olympics. And the idea is that teams of kids with and without disabilities compete for a team, like here at Concord High School here in New Hampshire, against other teams at other schools where they have kids with and without disabilities. So it's integrated, inclusive, mixed ability sports competition. They still have a great time out in the fields. They still compete to win, but they do it in an inclusive way. So he played not only track, but he did soccer as well. And he even played some basketball. Then he got involved in something called the Be the Change Club, which was a club where kids at Concord High School got together and found ways to create a welcoming culture for a lot of the new Americans that we had coming into our community. We had a lot of refugee resettlement from countries in Africa. We had Iraq, the former Yugoslavia, Bhutanese people from all over the world. And this club wanted to make them feel welcome. They wanted to create that sense of belonging that Samuel craved so much. So he got involved in this club and the activities. He also developed some really incredible leadership skills in high school. When we started in middle school, we decided we would want Samuel to help co-lead his IEP meetings. And this was not just a once-a-year meeting, but we were really collaborative with our school to have regular check-in meetings as often as every month. And so Samuel would have these check-in meetings. We would assemble a group. This is a pretty large group in this photo. This included his regular education teachers, English and science and social studies. It included his paraprofessionals at school, his guidance counselor, occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapist, myself and Betsy, my wife. And also you'll see under the table, we brought Samuel's service dog, Proton, along with us, which always takes down the tension quite a bit. But what else you might notice in this picture is to Samuel's right is a little yellow button. And Samuel would work with his special education coordinator before the meeting to come up with a PowerPoint that would walk people through the agenda. And then Samuel would not only help design the agenda in the PowerPoint, but then push that yellow button to kind of toggle through the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint would start with something like this, you know, welcoming people to his check-in meeting. He would have an agenda, a real agenda on the left, like classes, talking about his communication device, homework, related services, transition planning, and then kind of a fun agenda, fly to the moon, win the Nobel Peace Prize, fall in love, trying to keep it light. And then this was really, I think, the most critical piece. The regular education teachers, English, social studies, science, et cetera, math, would go first. And they would give some quick updates using 2 guiding questions that help you get at pretty much anything you want to talk about. What is going well and what could be improved? What's going well, what could be improved? And we just go around from English into biology, social studies, and ask those questions. And then some days, those general education teachers would leave after 15, 20 minutes, because that might be all they had. But it allowed them to say what was going well, what could be improved, and how can we brainstorm around that. We would also, Samuel got very much involved in the TV station, the local TV station that was part of the high school's curriculum, extracurricular activities. So he did sports broadcasting. Up against that green screen every Friday, he would give a Red Sox or a Patriots report and give people the latest sports news of the day. And it was great because we would go to the local supermarket and, you know, kids that Samuel might be in school with who were doing checkout bagging or something, they wouldn't see Samuel as, oh, you're the kid in the wheelchair. They would say, oh, you're the kid that does the sports report, right? Every Friday, which was a great way to be recognized around the community and to make himself feel like he belonged in all different parts of our community. Samuel has now moved on from Concord High School, and he's working quite a bit. But the experience he had at Concord High School really set him up for employment. He's now doing his own film work, and he and I are collaborating on some projects together. This was a recent interview we did with the incredible disability rights advocate, Judy Heumann. We're working on a film project right now where Samuel is interviewing people from all over the country, people with disabilities who are incredible leaders and activists about their transition to adulthood and what it was like and what he can learn from them about transitioning to education, higher education, and housing and healthcare and relationships. He's also filming, as you see on his chair here, with his own 2 GoPro cameras throughout our adventures all around the country and what he's doing. And so he's doing his own first-person filmmaking. And as you can see in some of these images, there's some incredible things that we're seeing and witnessing, including, you'll see on the top left, Joe Biden at an event back when he was there for the New Hampshire primary. You see his brother Isaiah here in the central middle. Here Samuel is leading us into a voting booth. So really some incredible opportunities Samuel's had to capture the world around him. Samuel also has done incredible activism work. When he was in high school, he was really upset that in the basketball games, all students were sitting high up on the bleachers, because that's what students like to do, right? The student section was way up in the bleachers. Well, if you're in a 500-pound wheelchair, you are not going to get to the top of the bleachers. So Samuel put on his activism hat and said, you know what? I really want to make sure that I can sit with my friends. So he wrote an email to the principal and the athletic director, and he also got the basketball team to support him in saying, hey, can we move the student section down to the court? And not only would that allow Samuel to sit with his friends, but it would allow all the students to be closer to the court, and the basketball team would get more energy from them. And that's what the team said. They said, we want the students near us while we're playing to give us that extra boost. Well, they moved the student section down so that Samuel and others could all sit together. So Samuel has really taken on a very proactive approach to his activism and disability rights. Right towards the end of high school, he fully participated in all the kind of fun senior activities. He went to the prom with his friend Anita, picked out that bold fuchsia jacket, asked Anita if she could find a dress that might match it, and they talked about matching their colors. They had a great time at the prom. And then just days later, Samuel went through graduation with all his other fellow seniors and had an incredible graduation day with his brother and many other extended family members. So you might ask, well, when Samuel graduated, didn't he lose all special education services? Well, thankfully, the school worked with us and said, listen, we want you to have the full senior year experience, go to prom, go to graduation, but we can hold back 1 credit in math, let's say, so that you don't detach completely from the school system, and you can continue to get occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, take elective classes if you want, even though he'd achieved all the credits he needed at that point to get a regular high school diploma, because he had worked all the way through school with that goal in mind. He was going to work towards getting the credits towards a high school diploma. He also always thought about college as his next path. His friends were going to college, his brother went to college. So it was never for Samuel, can I go to college or will I go to college? It was when I go to college. That was his mentality. And I'm happy to say that Samuel is currently a college student at our local community college, New Hampshire Technical Institute, taking a wide range of classes from mindful communication to psychology, to contemporary ethical issues, to cultural anthropology, and he's passed all of his classes so far. He's just taking 1 per semester right now to just pace it, but he's doing really well as a college student. So I'm, of course, really proud of Samuel and all that he's achieved, and I could brag about him, all day. But I think it's important to emphasize that Samuel is not an aberration. He really is representative of what we know for kids with disabilities who are included in regular education alongside typical peers. Kids who are disabilities who are included are statistically more likely, much more likely, to have better communication skills, higher academic achievement, wider social networks, fewer behavior problems, more opportunities for higher education, and more meaningful employment as adults. And there's 30 years of research that supports these outcomes from inclusive education. And I've been asking people for a dozen or more years, show me a single study that says that kids who with disabilities who are in more self-contained, segregated settings have better outcomes in any of these areas. And no one has been able to show me a study that supports that. All the studies, all the research supports inclusive education. But here's the thing. We are still systematically segregating so many kids in this country, even though we had that data that supports inclusion. 56% of kids, for example, with intellectual disability spend the majority of their day segregated in special education environments. 56% of kids. And in fact, only 17% of kids with intellectual disability are included in regular schools. And what I mean by inclusion is it means they spend at least 80% of their day in regular education environments. That is the federal threshold for inclusion, spending 80% of your day in regular education environments. Only 17% of kids with intellectual disabilities are included by that measure. So why do we do it? Why do we continue to segregate so many students with disabilities when we know the data supports inclusion? And I think more and more, maybe it's not just the case I should make around Samuel's experience, even though, as I've explained, its inclusion has been critical for all aspects of his educational and social life. Maybe I can make the case that inclusion benefits typical kids, non-disabled kids, just as much as it benefits a kid like Samuel. Here's a study by a really wonderful researcher named Eric Carter at Vanderbilt University. And Eric was studying groupings of kids and how they did around the academic curriculum. And he found groups that were mixed groups, kids with and without disabilities working together, studying material towards an eventual test. And those were, again, groups of kids with and without disabilities working together, kind of a heterogeneous group. Then he found similar groups that were homogenous, that were just kids without disabilities studying the same material, working towards the same exams. So you had a very mixed ability group, and then a group that was just kids without disabilities, all working on the same material and studying the same material. What he found is that the non-disabled kids, the typical kids in that mixed group, were actually succeeding and getting 15 points higher on the exams they were taking than the group that was just kids without disabilities, that very homogenous group. So he tried to figure out, why is it that the kids without disabilities are doing better academically when they're in that mixed group? And he spoke with the kids, and the kids said, well, we were trying to work with each other and teach each other. And Johnny was struggling a little bit with the curriculum, so I was kind of reteaching it. And we were trying to look at it from all different angles and all different ways and talk about it. So he found the kids were basically, some of them were kind of co-teaching or reteaching the material. They were basically differentiating their instruction, right? Looking at it from all different angles. They were more engaged in the curriculum and the material because of the nature of the group. And when you have kids that are more engaged, that are looking at the material from all different angles, that are working with each other, supporting each other, co-teaching, reteaching, you're gonna learn the curriculum more, and you're gonna do better on the test. And that's what he found. So there's the academic piece that you can make the case for. And I've never seen a study that shows that inclusive education in any way damages the academic outcomes of kids without disabilities. I've never seen a study like that. But there's also the social experience of school. And I remember when I was a kid, I remember the walks to school were just as important to me and just as interesting, if not more so, than the academic experience of school. So think for a minute about how school helped make you who you are today. And I don't mean just, your job or anything, but, what are the books you choose to read? What are the shows you watch on TV or streaming? Who are the people you hang out with? What are the hobbies you've picked up? How did school make you the whole person you are today? And how many of you would say the academic experience of school had a bigger impact on who you are versus the social and emotional experience? And I've asked a lot of groups this question, and I find that overwhelmingly, it's the social and emotional experience of school that has a more profound impact on who you are today. But how do we measure school success? Do we measure it by how schools are doing, by the social and emotional impact on kids? Or do we measure it by how they're doing on the academic, grade points and test scores? Usually the latter, usually it's the test scores. Well, we may see that if you have a really diverse, interesting environment in school of kids with and without disabilities working together, in addition to diversity around race and class and ethnicity and sexual orientation and gender, all those aspects of diversity make for a much more rich social and emotional experience, and actually will be perhaps more formative on who you become as an adult. So where this really was illustrated for me was an experience we had when Sam was younger, in his early teen years. And he brought his friends Jacob, who's here riding on the back of his chair, and Fletcher with me on a road trip to Cooperstown, New York, which is where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And we had a great time in the Hall of Fame. We went all the way around the museum and saw all kinds of cool Red Sox exhibits. The kids were all big Red Sox fans. But then it was time to go out for lunch in the community. And if you look at this picture, you probably notice a really significant obstacle we face in the community trying to get into a store to have lunch or to go souvenir shopping. Almost every single store in that block had a step. And when you've got a step even 2-3 inches and you're in a power wheelchair, that is a massive wall to get over. You just can't do it. So the kids were really frustrated, and it took us almost 45 minutes just to find a place to have lunch. And they were pretty bummed out about it. So when we got home a week or two later, they were over for a football game and said, we should write a letter to Cooperstown and express how we feel. So they started drafting this letter that they wanted to send to the newspapers and the Chamber of Commerce. And it said things like, we are very mad because almost all the stores in downtown Cooperstown are not accessible to someone in a wheelchair. We had $100 to spend, and we had a rule. If Sam couldn't get into the store, then none of us would buy anything from it. We hope that this letter will change downtown Cooperstown before anyone else has to struggle with what we did. And they sent this letter off to all the newspapers in the town, the Chamber of Commerce. I think I put my cell phone on it somewhere. And I got a call back about 2 weeks later after the letter had been published in the papers. And the Chamber of Commerce said, "Oh, Mr. Habib, I'm so glad you and your sons reached out to us, and we'd like to become a more accessible community. Do you have any thoughts for how we can become more accessible?" And I'm thinking, ramps? Ever heard of ramps? They've been around since like the pyramid days. But I wasn't so snarky. I didn't quite say that. But I did, suggest that a lot of these thresholds could have been ramps. I also was wondering, like, why are they calling a filmmaker 300 miles away when they must have, architects, people who use wheelchairs, disability rights advocates, urban planners in their own district? Anyway, so it was fine. It was a fine call. And the interesting thing, though, was a couple years later, friends of ours who have family in Cooperstown went there and had heard this story and said, "Dan, you're not going to believe it. Dan and Samuel, they have totally changed downtown Cooperstown sidewalks. Almost everything's accessible now. They've rebuilt it." And so, of course, we're thinking, hey, that letter had an impact. And maybe it had a bit of an impact. But I think more importantly, because perhaps they had this plans in the works for a long time, more importantly, think of the lesson that it taught Samuel and Jacob and Fletcher about human rights, about standing up for a friend, about equal access for all, civil rights. I mean, these are the profound lessons that will be formative in who they become as adults. And actually, Fletcher's mom, who's a school teacher, used this whole example of advocacy and writing a letter in her own class. So they never would have had that lesson. They never would have had this experience. They never would have learned that powerful experience of advocacy unless they had Samuel as a friend their whole life, unless they had chosen to go with him to Cooperstown. They never would have had this experience if they had lived in a community that segregated kids with disabilities outside of the regular school. So perhaps it's about Samuel, and perhaps it's about peers like Fletcher and Jacob, but it's also about our future as a country, and about our sons and daughters yet to come, and our nieces and nephews yet to come or yet to grow up, and our grandchildren to come someday. What kind of world do we want them to live in? Now, I know that I want them to live in a world where disability is seen as a normal part of our world. This is just part of life, that there are people with disabilities and they don't need to be segregated or separated or stigmatized. They should be in our schools, in our community, in our families, and in our workplaces. So one of the things that really struck me about Samuel's experience in Barbara O'Brien's class, going back to his elementary school years, was the fact that she was so welcoming to students of all abilities. And as I said earlier, he was in a K-1-2 multi-age classroom, but she was also so welcoming to kids who we were seeing come into this community from other countries like Africa. And at one point, there was a kid that came from Burundi in Africa, from a war zone type of environment, was then in a refugee camp in Kenya for years, living in a tent, eating off a dirt floor. Really, their whole childhood had been spent in this refugee camp. And they come to Concord, New Hampshire, not knowing anything about the English culture or language or the American culture or the school culture. And Barbara said, boy, the kids in that classroom were so loving and so patient with this kid. They were so flexible and innovative and creative in their communication. They were just so incredibly, they showed such leadership and such flexibility in how they made sure this child felt included in the classroom. And she said, you know where they learned that? They learned that from Samuel. They learned that from being in the classroom with a kid that didn't move in a typical way or speak in a typical way or learn in a typical way. So what did they learn? They learned skills like creativity, communication, innovation, collaboration, empathy, patience. These are the kind of skills that are also being looked for by employers these days. It's not who got the A- on their algebra test, it's who can show these qualities that I'm talking about. So that is really what they learned from Samuel, and that is what I've learned from Samuel. So I tried to give you a sense on why I feel like inclusive education is so critically important for Samuel, certainly, and our family, but also for kids without disabilities in schools, kids with disabilities in schools, and really for the whole school culture and climate as a whole, as well as our overall society and our future societies. So much of my work that I do in film is really about this mentality of creating a culture of inclusion and getting at people's hearts and minds and making people feel like this is the essential direction for our country. And that's really what I tried to capture in my film, including Samuel. So you can watch actually a trailer of the film if you'd like. Right on our website, we have a very comprehensive website that has a film trailer. It's got resources. It tells you how to host a screening of the film. It's got lots of information here that I would encourage you to check out. But you know, as I started showing Including Samuel around the country and talking about it and meeting families, I realized that there are lots of other groups of students that have more hidden disabilities, unlike Samuel's very visible disability, students who I would say have what I call emotional behavioral disabilities. And the stats for those students in terms of inclusion are not good. Only 35% of students with emotional and behavioral disabilities in this country are included by that 80% threshold, meaning 80% of their time spent in regular education classes. So that got me to work on a second project after Including Samuel that was called Who Cares About Kelsey? And Who Cares About Kelsey focuses on a young woman, Kelsey Carroll, who has a lot of hidden disabilities. She's been diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety, but she also has a lot of trauma in her life that she's had to navigate and has resulted in a lot of PTSD and other issues. So the film Who Cares About Kelsey came out in 2012, and it shows how a school that does some really positive approaches to supporting students with emotional behavioral disabilities, to using things like positive behavioral interventions and supports, and a person-centered planning approach called Renew, a way to help students sit down, think about their lives, think about their goals, and really work with a team of people that they trust and believe in to help them work towards achieving those goals. What does that look like, and how can that be achieved in a school?
Freshman year I came here. They didn't really know my situation.
I got suspended for the intent of selling and possession of a controlled substance. And they were gonna report me to the police, but they didn't because it was my own prescription.
No one really helped me. Kind of didn't really care. Sophomore year wasn't good. Second sophomore year wasn't good. School was full of drugs.
There wasn't a day where someone didn't get in a fight or you didn't hear about someone doing drugs in the bathroom. So it was an everyday occurrence.
We can have lots and dreams and hopes for you, but you are the one that plays a critical role. What your vision, what your passion is, will determine whether or not you achieve those dreams.
Cheerleaders are supposed to be like preppy and nice and perfect and popular. I'm like mean and evil.
Let any one of these little kids say something, and I'm gonna hit them.
I overthink about things. I have one verse of a song in my head and I'll sing it over and over again because I can't stop thinking about it.
I don't like taking my medicine.
It makes me not want to eat, not want to sleep. When you have ADHD, you suppress a lot of things, like thoughts and anger and energy, and then one day, like, I am f***ing pissed off.
Like, you know, I've been working my ass off all freaking week just to fail now.
It's just a pain in the ass. I just get frustrated with it.
Kelsey has an emotional behavioral disability. The characteristics are someone who's withdrawn, who's impulsive,
Shut up.
who's depressed and anxious and has low self-worth. And those are all the characteristics that Kelsey demonstrates.
When you have like a shitty past, you personally like block it out so that you don't remember all the hard times.
When we lived in Georgia, like, we would have to get up, get dressed. My sister used to like wash us in the sink and like put like baby powder and stuff all over us. My mom was always drunk or high or whatever.
I hate myself for my kids suffering, and I know it's affected Kelsey, and it's probably her way of thinking. I don't like that. I don't like it at all.
When she was younger, I was constantly working. So there was a good chunk of my kids' lives where I wasn't around to follow through with what they were doing.
Kelsey, you're coming right down to the wire. I'm just saying that the tolerance level for misbehavior right now is very low. You got it?
Yep.
We want you to graduate.
If you dwell like on the bad things that, like, 'cause I had really bad, like, when I was growing up, you tend to get, like, think about it a lot. You get depressed. So, like, what's the point in thinking about it? I just block it out completely.
By not asking for help, Kelsey, you're setting up your own roadblock. You're always going to need to find someone you can trust, and that's something that you just have to internally accept, you know? You're a very determined person, and you feel like, I've always taken care of me. I don't need anybody in my life to help me. There's going to be a time in your life, and this is right now, you might need more than just yourself to get through this. And there's no shame and there's no embarrassment in that. You know what I mean?
One day, they told me to go to this meeting. I didn't know what it was for, but I went anyway because I wouldn't have to be in class, so it was kind of cool.
All right, so Kelsey, what's the agenda for today?
Graduating, why not?
Graduating.
If I don't graduate, I'm pretty sure I'm not coming to this school.
How many classes is she passing right now?
2 of her classes right now.
Out of 4?
Out of 4.
Okay.
Which is
so
opposite
that's going to
and-
put her way off track for graduation.
Right. 28 days until I graduate, kind of. It's crunch time.
The reality is Kelsey has stopped taking her meds. She feels it really changes her personality, and she doesn't like how it makes her feel. She wants to try to manage this ADHD on her own.
Take the magazine, put it in. Right now it's on safe.
Police work is obviously what I want to do.
If you want to do criminal justice, that's fine, but like I've been saying, I've seen a department turn down a female that was your size because I think that they think she wouldn't have been able to handle herself.
Kind of hoping that won't be the case. I always thought his perception on me was that you can't do anything, you won't go on to anything. I want to prove my father wrong. B1 plus B2. I don't know how to do that. Get over here! Now, I need help.
You want to help her with this?
What are you having trouble on? Nothing, just being stupid. 32 plus 36 plus 35. Awesome, great job.
You know, Tuesdays we've been doing check-ins. You staying on track.
And then 20 divided by 4?
Your goals are being met.
Yep, exactly.
And then when I met with you on Thursday, I said, what's going on in math? And you said you did something that you really don't typically do.
I asked for help.
Stare out a cold window. Close your eyes as the shadows grow. Maybe they'll leave you alone, but that's not how this story goes. Meet in a snowy field. Lower my sword as shield. Your wounds, they will never heal, and there's nothing left for you to steal. Then you'll understand. Baby, then you'll understand.
And if you go into the multimedia section of that film, you'll also see that we did a series of short films all around these issues of supporting and including students with emotional behavioral disabilities. I also did a series of interviews with incarcerated youth, talking about what it was in their lives when they were younger, at elementary school, middle school, to put them on that path towards getting in trouble with the incarceration system and what could have made a difference. And there's a couple of stories on students with autism. One is called Axel and one is called Taja. And then there's a story, a film about the issue of restrained seclusion. But I want to focus on this one right now, Taja. I was really honored to be able to spend some time in a school where Taja was learning and studying. And it's a school in Somersworth, New Hampshire, that I would just say is doing some incredible work around supporting and including students with autism and all kinds of other disabilities. So with that, I want to share the film Taja, and then we'll talk a little bit about afterwards about some of the inclusive practices that you see in the film Taja.
Tidak biasanya melakukan hal-hal.
When I first brought Tasha to school, I was a little nervous. I was worried because at home, Tasha didn't really do things like normal kids do. Sometimes she wouldn't listen to me, or sometimes she just screamed, or sometimes she just cries.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6,
I brought her to a doctor for the brain. He confirmed that this child does have autism.
We knew right off that she was incredibly motivated by music and musical instruments and doing things that way, so we wanted to keep developing like a whole box of tools of things that would keep her engaged, because she also has a very short attention span, so something that would engage her one day wouldn't necessarily the next. We wanted to teach her in a different way so that she wasn't running to the heater and banging on the heater or pulling the plugs out of the computers. So
she would have meltdowns sometimes, just if schedules were off or if people were different or if she just didn't get her way. Where are we going? Are we going to finish the book? So we wanted to be able to be proactive about constantly trying to try different things to make sure that she is able to express what she wants or needs or feels to the best of her ability.
Thin. It was another very thin, easy to pour liquid. How many states of matter are there again? Three. There are 3 states of matter, and what are
when Tasha came to my class last year, she had a very basic, what we called a talk box, so a augmentative communication device. And it had like 5 basic pages of pre-programmed things, and she used it in structured settings that were the same all the time, so we could make calendar one of the pages that worked all the time. But we found that she was wanting to say and was more engaged than that device allowed.
And finally, last May, we were able to purchase, the district did, the Vantage Light for her to use. She is usually able to go through multiple steps to finding different things that she wants to say.
I am snack.
You're a snack?
Let's go. Anything else? The team itself went to a lot of trainings on how to support her using it, and she became a lot more involved in the classroom that way, socially and academically. So we were able to make pages that connected to every lesson in the room instead of just the things that happened every day all the time, as well as social pages of asking questions and telling jokes. And we found that once she got that, there were joke pages on it, and during snack time, all of the kids would come over and they'd ask her to tell them a joke. They would ask if they could touch it too.
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no? They wouldn't let us in.
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no?
I psycho. Her hands resting on my
Yes.
neck.
Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello.
Since Tasha has had her device, her behaviors have decreased. In the small amount of time that she's had the device, it's also really increased her verbal output. She is saying all kinds of different things.
Who is this? Have a library on Friday.
You do. I think with this device and from the help of her teachers, she's learning more and more.
I go to Mrs. B.
Go to Mrs. B.
With this, at home, she speaks sentences that she would never speak before.
Yeah. She, when I first started here at recess time and at lunchtime, would just kind of be by herself. But this year, she's really become very socially aware of what's going on in the class and wanting to be with her friends and sit by them and do what they're doing.
I've been out on the playground before for recess duty, and there'll be a student with autism or another disability that will walk by, and there are some kids who, without having those experiences, tend to shy away. But when I look out and I see students from my class out there, they're engaging with everyone, and they will go over and they'll want to play with Tasha. I feel like they take it and that's a life lesson for them, and that sometimes those lessons are better than what the magic E does in a word.
I'm sleeping in school! Wake up!
We became part of the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support System, PBIS, back when the state of New Hampshire first provided that as an opportunity. So we really looked at that as how we could provide a good, strong, universal basis. And then we have students who we may need a more intense program with. For those, we'll bring in quite a few staff people, possibly some people from the community who are involved in wraparound services, and look with them how we can support them through not only our own, but area agencies. We want to make sure that the classroom teacher is the pivotal person. There are individual meetings each week so that the classroom teacher would come to the meeting so that the special education providers would have an idea of what the classroom teacher is working on so that all of their lessons can be supportive of what the regular classroom is doing. Somersworth is not an affluent community. You know, we do not have a lot of economic resources. However, we feel like we are people rich. It has just been committed to that kind of an approach ever since we began working with students with significant disabilities. It's just who we are. Yeah.
I was happy to know that my kid, Tasha, will be in the same class as everyone else because I thought it would give her the opportunity to look at other kids who are normal and do what they usually do. Instead of being in a classroom with just more kids with autism, then I would feel that she wouldn't really learn anything new.
If she wasn't in the classroom, she wouldn't be able to see what the other kids were doing to pick it up. She's very observant of what the other kids are doing. Some of the kids that she is in the classroom with now have been with her for a year or two, or have been with other students with different disabilities. So they're very open to helping out, and they're aware that they're modeling also.
We have to touch her. No, don't touch her, Bree. I'm not touching her. She's touching me, Edward. No.
My philosophy is that social growth and learning how to engage with everyone in the world is just as important as learning your academics. And I have just felt that the kids have so many rewarding experiences just learning to accept and to understand and to support people that are different.
I am Loomis. Let's rotate paper.
We want her to be Tasha, and if Tasha is going to do her work at her desk or at a table or under the table or wherever, that's fine.
If you're not willing to differentiate your instruction for the wide range of learners that you have, including students with autism, then you're not in the right profession.
We're in front. Excuse us.
Yeah, she makes me a much better teacher. Patience is a virtue.
Where are you going? The piano, right here.
Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and very often we learned things from Tasha that we wouldn't have learned had she not been in here. She amazed the class all the time.
Just want to let you know that we've never actually done this before, so we're kind of figuring it out as we go along. This is also a concert for to hear some special piano playing. So you're going to hear some solos on the piano. And she's playing one of our flutophone songs now.
As a parent, I am worried about her, about how she will be and how she would be like socially, her development socially. Even if she still has autism, I think she can find happiness because I think she's a happy child. She's always expressing her feelings through music.
Softly. Third line. Fourth line.
In the film Taja, I think you see a wide range of practices that help her be successful in general education, inclusive practices. You saw examples of flexible seating, where Taja used a rocking chair or other seating to make her feel more comfortable. You saw a strength-based approach where her musical skills were really tapped into and used as an opportunity to let Taja shine and also provide some positive incentive at times from getting through some other activities. They had done a lot of work around something called a functional behavioral assessment, to look at the functional behavior. You know, what is it that triggered Taja to have those moments of really difficult behavior? And is there a way that they could somehow find out what those triggers were and reduce them? So they found out that just saying the word no to Taja was often a trigger. And they found ways to say, Taja, it's not time to do that now, let's do this instead, and avoid using the word no. They gave her access or helped support her access to communication technology, to assistive and augmentative communication. And I like to say that behavior is a form of communication. When someone is having trouble or challenges with their behavior, it often means that they're not able to communicate in an effective way, and they're using behavior, you know, their challenging behavior is indicating that they're having trouble communicating. So having access to a communication device was critical for Taja. You saw also, as she used her communication device, her verbal output actually increased. And that's what research has shown, that communication devices do not reduce verbal communication. They actually accentuate it and allow students to sometimes communicate more effectively verbally when they have access to communication device. You also saw examples of positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS, where Taja was really being incentivized and supported in positive behavior rather than being disciplined or criticized for what might be considered, you know, challenging behavior. You saw great examples of universal design for learning, where students were able to access the curriculum and show what they know through a wide variety of educational approaches. So much in that film, I think you'll notice, really captures what is effective educational practices in action. So my early films focused largely on people with physical disabilities and emotional and behavioral disabilities. But I realized that there was one group of people that I hadn't focused extensively on, and that was people with intellectual disabilities. And what I learned through a lot of research is that people with intellectual disabilities are actually segregated in some ways more significantly than any other group of students and adults with disabilities. So one particular stat that illustrates that is that only 17% of students with intellectual disability are included by, again, the federal threshold of spending at least 80% of their day in a regular education setting. And in fact, when you look beyond school or at the end of school, you've got only 40% of students with intellectual disability graduating from high school, and you've got a 15% employment rate for people with intellectual disabilities trying to enter the workforce. So those are obviously awful outcomes that none of us would agree should be sustained. And it got me thinking, what are the greatest obstacles for people with disabilities, especially intellectual disability, but really all disabilities? And one thing I came to understand was that the way we perceive intelligence in our society is a major barrier for people with disabilities. And we experienced that in our own life very personally, because Samuel, although he has a physical disability, just the way people perceive him as a young man using a wheelchair and a communication device who has trouble speaking, I can't tell you how many times people talk to him like he's a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, and it really angers him. But that's because they perceive him to not be intelligent based on his physical appearance. So I started thinking about making a film that would really challenge the way we perceive intelligence, and looking at what would a new paradigm for human value and participation look like. How could we show that people of all abilities and all disabilities can fully participate in all aspects of society, school, college, relationships, higher education, the workforce, community activity, community life, everything. So I really thought that one way to show this would be to show how, if we infuse technology, really innovative technology, high expectations for people, and this more broad view of intelligence in our schools and our workplaces, that we could make a difference. And that's what led me to create the film Intelligent Lives. So I want to show you a trailer from Intelligent Lives and then talk a little more about both that film, but also some of the short transition films that I made as part of that larger project.
Our son, Jesse, had cerebral palsy. When Jesse was 4, the neurologist told us that he would never be intellectually normal. We fought to have Jesse included in general education.
The IQ test measures a very limited potential of our brain to learn and misses all the other stuff.
Naomi, Micah, and Nair, 3 young adults with disabilities, unlocking their potential.
You happy with your tip you made?
Yeah.
You know what you're gonna buy with this?
Cell phone.
I'm getting a 9-degree certificate in disability studies.
Nair is not afraid to freely express himself.
Do you want to go to college?
Yeah.
When people say, why is your school successful? Because we include students with significant disabilities. We don't use IQ tests to inform us at all.
Not long ago, IQ testing was used to fuel a pseudoscience known as eugenics, which called for eliminating the menace of the feeble-minded. Institutions like Willowbrook more closely resembled prisons than schools.
We have to broaden our understanding of what intelligence is. I want my son to go into a world where he's looked at not there as a tall black guy who's acting weird.
Whether it's a police officer or a civilian, you do wonder what's going to happen.
I think because of Naomi's unconditional love for what she does, it's good for everyone.
Are you on Facebook?
No.
Okay.
My parents don't think that's safe.
What do you remember most about today? Be ourselves. Be ourselves.
Can any attempt to measure intelligence predict a person's value or ability to contribute meaningfully to the world?
I want to let you know that when you want to learn more about this film, please go to the website. We have some really incredible information and resources on the website. We've got a whole resource library that we created over many years of collecting the best material we could find on issues like transition, assistive technology, disability rights, employment, guardianship, on, intelligence testing. And you can hit any of these areas and find what we found to be the most cutting edge information and resources on all these different topics. You can also learn how to rent and buy the film, host a screening of the film. There's a lot of material about the film on this page. And one particular thing I wanted to share was if you go to the middle of the website and just scroll down, you'll see that there is a section where you can watch these transition films that I made. And there are 4 short films that focus on post-secondary transition. And I think it's so critical when you're looking at this topic of students and inclusion to realize it doesn't stop in elementary school or middle school or even high school, that people are growing up, they're growing older, and they need to have opportunities to successfully transition to higher education, to employment, to independent living, transition through the healthcare system. There's so many different pieces of this that people need to be aware of that doesn't just stop at the end of the school year. So one of the films that I was really excited about making over the course of this project was the film Garrett Shows I'm in Charge. And what I want to do now is show you this short film about very successful transition approaches within a high school in New Hampshire, Conval High School, and how Garrett, through his own perseverance and energy and family support, really thrived in a high school where he was included, where there was high expectations, where he had access to technology and internships and all kinds of great opportunities to show his strengths and prepare for a transition to his goals of higher education and employment. So this is the film Garrett Shows I'm in Charge.
What do we do? Out.
All right, bring it in tight, guys. All right, we're on our home floor again, right? Yep. Crowd's growing. You guys play your heart out, all right? You all know what you're doing all there. You work together, all right? Partners, you know your role, right? Get the ball up there. And you shooters, put it in the hoop, right?
Hey, Jackson!
Good try!
I play on the unified basketball team. It's kids with and without disabilities playing together. It's definitely fun, and you get to like interact and make friendships, which is huge for me. So.
They hustle 21! They hustle 21! We gotta get some more shots. We gotta get more shots. All right, okay? Team on three. Team on three. 1, 2, 3, team! Take it, go!
Shoot it.
Jack!
Here you go. Yeah, drink some water, okay? Nice game, Garrett. You guys tried so hard. You should be proud of yourselves. Do you see all your fans, though, Garrett? Look.
We were living in Atlanta at the time. Both boys were born premature. Ryan, who's now 21, was born 5 weeks premature. No problems with him. Garrett was a different story. Arlene went into pre-labor much earlier, almost 3 months.
And he did have a bleed on the brain, so that part's a mystery. When somebody has damage to their brain, no matter if it's a child in Garrett's situation or a soldier coming back from a war, brain trauma is brain trauma.
Part of my brain was ended, probably severely. The left brainstem started to bleed out. Obviously, I forget a lot of things. I forget sometimes, the bathroom is to the left, down the hall to the left, and then I forget. I always go, I think I go down the hall to the right.
And you're going to carefully take the flower apart, lay out the pieces, discuss the function.
Just cut off there.
Cut it here, okay. on the stem. Good.
It takes me longer to finish a lesson. Well, the average kid, twice as long as that, so it takes me a long time. But school gives me more time, as much as I need. Sometimes, when I'm really stressed out, I sometimes go in the hall and take 1 lap around the room and take 2 laps or however many I want to calm me down. And then I go back and hit the reset button. It's right here. Hey, how you doing?
It's like half an H.
I know. You know, I really want to be independent. Obviously, my mom, my dad wants me to be independent as well. I want to have a relationship of my own. I want to live in my own house, not under my parents' roof, to do what I want, when I want, where I want. I think that's every kid's dream. I really want my diploma. I really want my name to be announced and get my high school diploma. And I'm gonna work toward it every step of the way, no matter what I have to do. I don't care what I have to do, I will do it with a positive attitude, and I might groan here and there, but I have to remain positive if I want that, and I really want that, so.
Sure? Yeah. Looks kind of messed up.
And obviously my brother has a huge impact of my life, and just like when I'm down, he like kind of motivates me, saying like, come on buddy, just one more.
Yours guy's on custom made paddle with, what's this guy's name?
Jim Carrey.
Yeah, Jim Carrey on it.
No way.
Yeah.
He's definitely a role model for me. I look up to him so much. I respect him, I love him.
I mean, honestly, I could flip it on the other hand and say he's probably pushed me more than I've pushed him. And the fact that Garrett's become a part of my life, I've just become a better person in that way. I never really see Garrett not happy. He's kind of always happy and smiling around. Probably the most social kid ever. Somebody out there is going to be very lucky one day to meet my brother and, you know, possibly marry him one day or whatever.
I think he can tend to be lazy on things that he doesn't like to do. Math is one of them. So I'm constantly pushing him because I think that will help him in the future with whatever job he can finally obtain and to try to improve his capability to be independent. So I push that harder on him educationally. Why don't you save the bottle? Save the bottle for work.
Okay.
You know, and then you can just fill that up with the tap water. Garrett's I think one of his strongest skills is he's very social. They had no idea what the person they were getting when they hired him is. They're seeing that as a real plus for him. To be early is?
To be on time, to be early is to be, gosh, I always forget this. To be early is to be late, to be early is to be on time, to be
on time
is to be late.
That's right.
Yes. I've never been late to any two shows, either early or exactly on time. Never late, ever. And I don't ever intend to do that.
That's fun. Have a good shift.
Okay, see you later.
Love you.
Love you. See you later.
And I'll be here at 6:30 to pick you up, okay?
Yes, sir. I don't really have a title. I'm just a code guy. Whatever they need me to do, I'm there. Did you film that? Did you film everything you want me to do?
I did, yeah. Great, thanks.
You know, every kid's dream is to work to earn money, and I really want to go to UNH. If I run on the computer and type up how much money do you have to save in order to go to UNH. So I wrote down that amount of money and I'm saving it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Golisano. I'm a sophomore at Connolly High School. Let me tell you about myself. My interest: eating chocolate and peanut butter, playing captain flag and unified basketball, learning more about being independent and prepare for college. My abilities: interacting with people, playing sports, making friends. Things that are harder for me: remember more than one or two directions, geometry, memory.
So you had a huge year with transition.
I'll say.
You are one of the few sophomores I know that has a job. And you pretty much got that all by yourself.
Our biggest thing is working towards that goal of independence. That's really huge for him.
So.
Next year too, I think we talked about doing internships.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask.
Yep,
Right.
and getting you outside of the building, even maybe going down to the middle school or some of the other schools around
That's
here.
the goal. Yep, that's I really want to do. I really work well with young children. I am going to start looking at colleges.
Okay. So you've been doing very well in English class.
I feel like I get distracted very easily though with like other classmates of mine.
Mom and Dad are here, and
Nobody's
I'm
gonna
here,
leave you alone.
and Miss Mon is here, and these ladies are here. We're all here for you. And so when you have frustrations, or you're like, I just don't get it, we say, okay. And Garrett, remember, when you're feeling overwhelmed, go to those first couple slides, which is who you are as a person. Goes so much farther than anything, and that is that you get along really well with people, you have people skills, you're caring, you're loving, you're outgoing. Those go a long way, and remember that when you're feeling overwhelmed, okay, I'm really a great person, and I just want to push myself farther.
Yep.
So don't get too overwhelmed about stuff.
Okay.
So I thought this was a great meeting. Can I do the last slide?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all your help. And yeah.
I love it. That's awesome.
I feel like obviously it's all about me in the end. It's my IP meeting. I'm in charge of it.
You did a good job leading your own meeting for the first time. No, I think we covered everything. Thank you.
I think we did.
I hear you did good yesterday.
Yeah, we won.
Yeah? You won?
We play a game today.
You play another game today? So Garrett is here as an intern. The idea of that is I kind of mentor him, teaching. All right, so what's our plan? What are you going to do? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do. All right, you're going to help with the warm-up.
Okay.
Okay? And then when we make the teams, after the teams are made, you put on any penny you want, and I want you playing.
Okay. Wait. Oh, yeah. What's up? How you doing? Good.
I've known him since he's a fourth grader. He was always popular with his kids because he has charisma. And he's actually a natural leader. He does a nice job. How's it going, Garrett?
Good. Hey, what number are you on?
Huh?
What number are you on?
I'm on 12.
Okay, 12. Okay.
Maroon is out. All right, yellow there.
Hey, Phil, can I have help? Yeah.
Garrett, remember the stretchy part? That always goes over your head first. Sleeves through.
Okay. Out. Okay. Ah! Good job, Dylan! Yeah, Dylan!
Why should other schools do it? It's my experience that it's positive for everyone. It's positive for the teacher. It's positive for the students. And I know in Garrett's case, he loves it. I mean, he runs down here. He runs into the gym. He's enthusiastic. And it's just a benefit all around. What you saw today is what happens every day. Garrett's just a great kid, and they love him. That simple. So Garrett has something to say to you.
Have a great weekend. You did awesome today. Still needs some work to improve on, but that's why we practice, get better, and
Right,
improve.
and Sill's very handsome.
Sill's very handsome. He's
Okay.
the best teacher.
All right, let's go. Get out of here, kids. Have a good weekend. Yeah.
Bye.
When Garrett was in elementary school, they brought in a MR, representative of mental retardation specialist, because they had to give him an IQ test. It was part of like whatever process we were in, and he did not score well. He scored in the MR category, and they were trying to put that label on him. It was very hard for me to swallow. Labels in general to me are irritating because I feel like there's plenty of people who could label me short, label me with freckles, label me a New Yorker, and they don't know me, and they don't know Garrett. That's not who he is. You have to have a tough shell because I'm constantly looking around to see if people are judging Garrett, and as a mom, it's hard, and you're just saying, please, just take a minute to get to know him because you'll be rewarded if you do.
Everybody had their own challenges. Obviously, mine is like huge, but not like very severe. But just like pick yourself up when you're down and try harder and try your best, and everything will fit in.
And he's actually somebody that I've learned and grown from more than anybody else in my life. That makes me so proud of him, because he's not afraid to be himself. And aren't we all a little bit afraid to be ourselves?
I hope you enjoyed that film. The people who have watched this film have often pointed to the scene where Garrett is leading his own IEP meeting as one of the really powerful moments in the film. And I agree. I think student-led IEPs are absolutely critical. And we've been doing that more and more with Samuel in his life in school, and I'm seeing that happen more and more all around the country. But there's some other things that I hope you noticed in the film that represent best practices in transition. So some examples that I'll just point out is promoting self-determination, that there's always this effort in Garrett's high school and in his family to let him make decisions about his own life and think about how he wants to steer his life. Self-determination has been shown to be one of the most critical factors in successful transition. You saw that they were creating leadership opportunities for Garrett to lead his own IEPs, as I said, but also to take on that role in the gymnasium, where he was able to be a leader and help to teach the class. Inclusive education obviously is critical. You saw Garrett in the science class and heard how in that class and other classes, certain accommodations were created so that Garrett could walk around the school. There may be some modifications or accommodations in his work or his working style. He might have more time. You saw that Garrett is working. That I think came mostly from his family's pushing and his own desire to work and make money and develop job skills. But he was working at the supermarket and saving money for college. You got a little bit of a glimpse of this in the film, and you'll see this some more in some of the other transition films on our website. But it's so critical that schools have interagency collaboration, meaning schools, vocational rehabilitation, the area agencies that might support people with disabilities, post-secondary schools, colleges, other groups are all working together and not in separate columns, and there's too much separate work going on in so many of our communities where coordinated effort could be much more effective and much less confusing for the family and the student. You got the sense in Garrett that there was a real emphasis on these internships, and at Conval High School specifically, they have a great program for what's called extended learning opportunities, meaning not everything has to happen in the school building. There's so much education that can happen in community-based settings, in volunteering for businesses, nonprofits, fire departments, whatever it might be. And you can get credit for those things, and you can even make money sometimes during those things. Also, you saw that Garrett was on a regular diploma track. That was really important to him. And a lot of schools, unfortunately, set you off on a different track early on in your educational career that can prevent you from getting a regular high school diploma. If you don't get a regular diploma, your options for higher education, for employment, for the military can be significantly limited. So it's really critical in Garrett's case and in many young adults that they stay on that track for a regular diploma, and whatever it takes, the school should be focusing on that and I hope that they support that student in achieving that goal. You also saw in some of these different films, a little bit in the Garrett film, but you see it in some of the other transition films on our website, the idea of person-centered planning, where you have a person, Garrett or whoever it might be, in the center of a team that they've assembled, that they trust, to help him think about his goals, his hopes, his dreams for the future. And then that group can work together to think about how creative ways can be achieved to achieve those goals, whether that's work, higher education, moving out of the house. We've been doing person-centered planning for Samuel for years. It's a really effective strategy, especially if you have a skilled facilitator. Important to provide in-school supports to students. If you see one of the other films I have that was set on a Native American reservation, one of the transition films, there's a whole scene that looks at career development activities and college to career counseling and how they bring college counseling into the school environment and don't just rely on students to seek it out on their own. Not so much in the Garrett film, but in some of the other films you'll see that I've made, and you certainly saw this in the Taja film, there's effective access to assistive technology and mainstream technology. And the fact that some students really require either access to mainstream technology in creative ways, whether that's iPads or iPhones or Chromebooks. Some students may require very specific dedicated technology. Either way, it's really important that technology is looked at by the school, by occupational therapists, by vocational rehabilitation to maximize those opportunities to open those doors. Again, higher education opportunities and supports, making sure that high expectations for students come with the idea that if you want to go to college, there's probably a college for you, whether that's a community college like Samuel goes to. Garrett has aspirations to go to University of New Hampshire. There are more and more programs around the country that are part of the Think College network that are specifically for students with intellectual disability or autism to have access to college and the whole college experience. You don't see this in the Garrett film, but certainly in some of my other films, you see this focus on cultural and linguistic responsiveness embedded into all transition services, so that if someone doesn't speak English or has a different cultural identity or whatever that cultural difference might be, that there's sensitivity placed on that, and that there's an understanding that not everyone maybe has the same needs for transition. Not everyone has the same language or the same values, and there may be a need to really look deeply into the family culture and support the family where they're at and the student. And then finally, fostering family involvement and high expectations is just so critical, that the family as a whole, as an entity, as much as they're able and willing, are involved and engaged and welcomed into that transition process. So I hope not only will you share the Garrett film, but look at the other 3 films on our website that are free, and each one has a discussion guide that you can use. Finally, I want to wrap up by just talking a little bit about leadership. I've been doing film work in schools now for about 15 years, and the one constant I see in truly inclusive, strong schools is great leadership. And that was never more true than when I was able to make a film very close to home, my own community of Concord, New Hampshire. And without giving away too much of the content of the film, I think you'll see when you watch this film that also features Samuel quite a bit, that leadership comes in surprising ways at surprising times. And there was this one moment that you see here, Samuel interacting with his principal, Mr. Connolly, that led me to think, I need to do a film in my own community. And I did this short film that you can watch in its entirety on YouTube, but you can watch an extended trailer right now. And I think more than anything, this gets at the passion and boldness of great leaders like Mr. Connolly and what kind of impact it can have to create a truly inclusive school and community.
Ladies and gentlemen, your principal, Jane Connolly. We invited every one of the 1,600 kids at Concord High School to think of a question they might have for him.
Hi, Mr. Connolly. What is your greatest accomplishment?
Mr. Connolly, what's your biggest fear?
Students asked about pretty much everything.
Hey, Mr. Connolly, I really want to know what you do to manage your flawless hair. I think it's amazing.
Students asked even the very toughest questions.
Have you ever considered assisted suicide or euthanasia?
To be 100% honest with you, I have thought about it. However, I am one of the world's all-time optimists. I have lost the use of my vocal cords, but because of modern technology, I have a machine that allows me to speak. However, all of you are missing my Boston accent.
Nice. Oh my God, yeah, there's definitely a strong resemblance. No doubt, the smile.
What was your first reaction when you found out you had ALS?
I remember leaving the doctor's office and my wife getting sick in the parking lot.
It's hard to tell somebody that it's going to be all right or things get better. Just embrace it and love him and get as much as you can every day.
That is when it hit me that this disease was going to kill me.
My son Samuel has had a disability since birth.
Does he like sunflowers? I like sunflowers.
Now Samuel was headed off to Concord High. I knew Connolly was devoted to making the school a welcoming place for every kid.
That's what kids feel, his real, genuine love for them.
Well, an inspiration to us all, Gene Connolly.
Life is full of challenges. We get little say in what happens to us, but everything to say in how we deal with it.
So with that, I want to thank you again for your time today and for listening to this presentation and watching with me. I'd be happy to connect with you afterwards. My email is here. We put a lot of stuff on our most recent website and Facebook page for Intelligent Lives, intelligentlives.org. The Twitter is IntelligenceDoc or Facebook at Intelligent Lives. My own personal Twitter is _Dan Habib, and I'm on Instagram at Dan Habib Films. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I just encourage all of you to keep pushing in whatever way you can for more inclusive schools, communities, neighborhoods. Don't get overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenges sometimes. Just think about that sphere of influence that you have, impact that classroom, your family, your neighborhood, your class, whatever it might be, your workplace, and just try and make a positive impact there, and you will be making a difference in the world. So thank you again. It's great to be with you. Take care.